This is top 10 techniques. And I'll go ahead and I'll get my camera going as well. And
looks great. We can see it.
You see it? Awesome. Perfect. And let me go ahead and I usually like to monitor the chat too. So if there's any questions coming in at the same time, let me pop that over on my other screen there. Perfect. Okay. So hi, everyone. As Michelle said, I'm Heather Severino. I am coming to you from sunny Florida. So I'm not in Minnesota. I've only been there once. I'd love to go back. So maybe eventually if we can have one of these in person, that would be awesome. But I'm happy to be here today to share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way when we are either having meetings or collaborating within team channels, chat, whatever it may be, where we can kind of engage everyone. We have a large audience here today, and it's been great to see that you all have been using the reactions so far to kind of let the speaker know what you think about that. And I really like that we can see the names now of who's reacting, so we can kind of engage that way as well. I'm excited about what was announced before about the word cloud, and there was another one too that caught my attention that I was excited about, and those will kind of tie into what I'm going to cover here with you today. So getting started, I would like to discuss, what's our agenda? What am I going to be covering that you may want to know about? And some of these things you might already be familiar with, but maybe you're not using them in the way that I'm going to demonstrate today. So hopefully you'll stick around for this. So when we think about engaging an audience, like what we're doing here today in this meeting, there's a lot of things that you need to prepare for ahead of time. Beyond practicing your presentation or going through your slides and those types of things, other things you should consider to incorporate to kind of make it more of an engaging experience, to make it more of that, what's the action that I want them to take away, and what do I want them to remember from this learning session, from this presentation, whatever it might be. So we're going to go through some of the newer things that have come about in the last year or so to several different Microsoft 365 applications like Designer and building an agenda, Dictate, how that can help you creatively put together a presentation, and then other things to consider that can help you engage in different ways like Presenter Live. So we'll be trying a lot of these things out in real time, so have your mobile devices handy if you want to try out Presenter Live with me, because you are going to need to take a picture of the QR code or type in that address to get into that. We're also going to get into polls, and you'll see me kind of flipping back and forth. This agenda is not necessarily the order we're going to go through it in, because I'm demonstrating a lot of these things live with you, and we're going to be incorporating these as it pertains to this session. So that's like 90% of it, right? All the stuff you need to do to prep for whatever it is you're going to be delivering or participating in. Then we get to the time of, okay, now what do I do? So during your session, during your training, during your presentation, whatever it might be, how can you use those reactions and polls? And I really like you guys have been using it so far. What's your favorite reaction? Go ahead and click on it now for me. I'd love to see what you got for me. I'm waiting for it. I don't see any yet. All right, we'll come back to that one. Co-authoring, how can you, oh great, I see the applause. All right, we've got some favorites coming in, thank you. How can you get everybody engaged in maybe not just chatting or talking, but let's take some notes together. Let's brainstorm together. And that was the other thing that I was excited to see is what's coming to Whiteboard. We really need templates. We need some additional capabilities there. And I'm going to just introduce a couple of things for you to kind of think through in Teams and how Whiteboard might work well for you versus OneNote. Time boxing. We've had some great time boxing here today, making up for time. How can we best use that? I like, Michelle, your timer at the beginning of this session. I'm going to show you a quick little tip that can help you with that as well. And then after, I only have one thing here, and that's intentional because I'm going to have you share a few of your things towards the end of the session of what you would incorporate here. And that's the attendance report. We all need to kind of gather who was in that meeting, who was in that presentation with me, and the attendance report does it for you. I often get questions about how can I capture the attendance in my OneNote notebook? Yeah, we used to have a great way to do it in Skype for Business. We could capture it pretty quickly and bring it right into that notebook. And we didn't have that functionality in Teams until attendance report came out. So I'll go through a couple of tips of why you want to capture that, where you might want to place it, and how you might want to use it as well. Oh, yeah, thanks for that feedback, Jake. Yeah, that's one thing we hope to see in the future soon, right? Reactions working a little better on the web client. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so with that, it is time for our very first poll, and Michelle is going to be getting this poll up for you in our session. So let me know, have you used Designer before in PowerPoint? You should have some answers there to pick from. Can't wait to see what your response is for this one. So if you're using the PowerPoint desktop app, that could be 365 or 2019, or the web app. It does work in both of those. Excellent. Lots of yeses. This is good to see. We've got one person that is saying, wait, I thought I was the designer. Great. Okay. A few people. Great. All right. Awesome. We've got still more answers coming in. That's great. So designer is something that is newer to PowerPoint. It's been around for a little while now, but there is something new that you may not have noticed yet. And I'd like to show you that one here first. So I'm going to go ahead and escape out of my slides for now. We might come back to them here in the near future. And I'm going to go over to this demo presentation that I've got going now. This is the web app, but again, I mentioned that you can work with Designer in the desktop application as well, and it works very much the same way, and you have the same opportunities there. So let's say that I'm here working on slide 2, and I'm starting to build this agenda. And if you're like me, I just want to kind of get it down on the slide first, and then come back and add something to kind of jazz it up a bit more. So if some of my agenda topics are going to be something like, you know, designer and, you know, presenter live. Well, actually, let me just do this. We'll just do present live as a shortcut. As you're going through this, what you should see happen is with this designer over here, it's going to start generating some ideas for you. Now, it might take a few tries of you putting some things in here for it to kind of pick up on what it needs to do with this slide. So let me do one more entry and see if we can get it to pick up this on this for us. So let's say that we're also going to do attendance. Now, what I'm trying to get it to do, and it may not cooperate here today, we might have to come back to it, is at the top of this designer area, it'll suggest to you that it sees that you are building an agenda. And would you like to create slides automatically from that? So if you have an outline or an agenda slide here in the upper right corner, and I'm just going to scroll through and see if it is showing up anywhere else. It's not quite showing up there yet. Let me click outside of here. So it's going to ask, would you like to build those slides? And then it's going to build those 3 slides for me below this slide that say designer, present live, attendance report. When we come back towards the end, I'll see if I can get it working a bit better for us, or give it another try and see if we can get it to show that for us. But that is something newer, you know, just in the last 5 months, maybe even less than that, of when this came out. So think of how much time you might spend getting those slides set up, where if you just start typing in what you need, it'll build all those slides out, and then you can go fill those out as well. So I see there's a question coming in. What if I have branding guidelines about everything needs to follow their template? Yeah, so it does work with certain templates. So I have seen that request in user voice before. So I would say check and see if user voice for PowerPoint is still up. I know they're making some of those switches of kind of moving things over to a first party solution. But if you're not, go ahead and put that suggestion in just to kind of let the PowerPoint team know that you'd like to be able to use that with your own templates. I believe right now it only works with the templates that come with PowerPoint. Great point though. And if I can find more resources on that, I'll kind of follow up on that with Michelle as well to get that out to you. All right, so designer, that's one of the great ones. It's great for kind of pulling in graphics. If you've not worked with this before, you'll see we've got a lot of choices over here on the right of different things that we can use, and additional choices down here at the bottom. It's also great at kind of moving the text around and kind of just giving it maybe a different feel than just that bullet list that you have on your slide, or just the things that come with the template that you're working with. So available in both applications for you. Now I'm going to move back over here. I've got the same presentation open that I was presenting to you at the beginning, and I'm going to move on down to our next topic here, which happens to be also related to ways that we can engage everyone. And that is maybe not reactions, but what if you want to, and I'll make this full screen so that we can discuss this a bit more, instead of just reactions when you're having a meeting or when you are having a conversation, maybe in chat or in a team channel, make it a little fun. You know, ask them to react with a GIF or some other way. Have a fun icebreaker at the beginning, maybe when you're coming back from break, whatever it might be that kind of just re-engages each person. Or instead of what you've been discussing for the last hour, something that just kind of gets them to switch gears, something light before we kind of get into that next heavy topic that we have. So I'd encourage all of you to do this with me if you will. In the chat area at the bottom, find a GIF that best represents fall to you. If you're excited about fall like I am, I'm tired of this hot summer that we've had. Let's see what you've got. Yeah, and there's that whole debate about GIF versus GIF, right? Am I saying it right? And I'll let you kind of be the judge on that one. So we've got some coming in. Thanks for playing along, Pete. Oh, that's a pretty drive, Michelle. I'd love to know where that is. All right, great, awesome. Oh, Kim picked the same one as Michelle. That's great. So kind of see what I'm doing here? We're kind of just making light of something. I know in some companies are like, oh, we have some of that stuff turned off, or we don't want to encourage that. But I really think that it kind of lets you get to know somebody in a different way, right? We're kind of having something that's a little bit of humor, a little bit about your personality, and we're able to just come off topic for a minute and then come back to where we are. So reactions are great, but I think there's also some other things that you can definitely incorporate as long as it doesn't get carried away too far and maybe be disruptive to something that we're talking about in chat at that moment. That's great. Thanks everybody for posting those. All right, so kind of going back to where we were, we've got another poll question for you. I would love to know this, and you're probably seeing the answer that I had down there in my notes. I'm going to go ahead and put it back into presenter mode here for everyone. So Michelle is going to put up another poll for you. When you're practicing what you're going to be delivering, how many times do you practice it before you deliver it? So feel free to go ahead and give one of those answers. And this could be anything. This could be a 20-minute presentation, a 1-hour training delivery, whatever it might be. How many times do you practice, or do you practice at all? Who needs practice? We've got that same 4 or 5 people, I think, that are answering that one the same way as the last one. Awesome. 5 seems to be the hot number here. Just do it live. Yeah, just write it and do it just on the fly. I'm with you on that one. Thanks for all the feedback, and I like how you're incorporating the GIFs along the way with this one as well. So if you're wondering, what is that magic number? Well, according to research, 10, and this is actually according to someone who has done quite a bit of TED Talks. She is well known, and she's one of the top TED Talks presenters, and she says that the magic number is 10. So whatever you think, go with it. But this is just for food for thought. Now, there is someone who says, 200 times they've practiced something before they've gotten up and delivered it. But I don't know anybody that would do that for maybe what we're doing every day in our work. If it's something bigger, more long term, maybe you would spend that much time practicing it. But 10 seems to be the magic number. When you're practicing, what are you evaluating? What are you looking at to know if you're going to be effective with your hand gestures, with your facial expressions, those nervous tics that you might have as far as the clutch words or those words that you repeat like, like, so, I'm guilty of it myself. You'll hear it throughout this session now that I've called attention to it. But there is something that can help you in PowerPoint with that delivery. And I'd like to have you look at this in a couple of different ways as we go through it. It's called Presenter Coach, and I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this presentation. Take us back to this presentation. And if I were pretending that I am practicing the delivery of this, if I go ahead and I find my Presenter Coach, it's called Rehearse with Coach right here. You'll hear different names that it's referred to as, but when you set this up, you can also have it include body language. This is a newer feature of this capability. So if I'm using a web camera, I can check this off, and it's now going to be evaluating not only listening to what I'm saying, but it's going to be looking at what I'm doing on camera as well. I'm going to go ahead and leave that unchecked for now and then just demonstrate the core functionalities of it here. All right, so we're getting started with this. You'll notice over to the right side that it's telling me what this is going to do. I'll go ahead and say start rehearsing. There's a checkbox here if I would like to get real-time feedback. You can uncheck that if you feel that that's distracting from your practicing, but I actually encourage you for the first couple times you're trying it out, leave it checked, have it give you that instant feedback, because I feel like it gives you the opportunity to improve on the fly or see what the rest of that presentation is like if you are conscious and make some of those corrections along the way. So I'm going to leave that checked, select start rehearsing. And now in the lower right corner, this is where it is going to be giving me that feedback. Now, as I'm talking, if I were to say something, I want to pause it and kind of think through what I'm going to say next, I can do that. And then if I want to go ahead and click the play button again, it's now listening through my microphone to give me that feedback, like my filler words. And if I were to say, hello, guys, how are you doing? Thanks for taking the time to attend today. It might pick up on guys and say I should be more inclusive by maybe saying something like, welcome salespeople, thanks for taking the time to join me today. So those are the types of things that it's looking for. If I speak very slow or I read exactly from the slide and know how to improve, it's also going to prompt and give me instant feedback that I'm speaking a lot slower, or I'm more known to speak a lot faster. And that's usually what I'm getting the feedback on as well. So it's telling me that I'm off to a good start to keep going. It's also very encouraging along the way for you to keep practicing. Here's what I really like about this. When you're done and you stop this, and if you exit, so I'm just going to press escape to get out of that, and I go back, I get a dashboard. And this dashboard is giving you overall ratings for all of the things that it is monitoring for you. So we can see that I practiced one slide. It took me about a minute. So if you're time boxing, you want to kind of better manage or your estimations of how much time you spend on each slide to make sure that you don't go over time. This is a great way for you to look at that and see, are you coming in at those estimations or not? Those filler words, what your pace was overall, your average pace over time. So where were you speaking a lot faster, maybe getting nervous about something, or where were you speaking a lot slower and maybe explaining something too much? And as we move on down, it's also looking at repetitive language, pronunciation of words, if you're being inclusive, as I mentioned before, saying salespeople instead of salesmen or saleswoman. And then it also looks at your pitch and originality. So pitch is if you have that vocal variety, you're not just monotone all throughout your presentation. Originality is you're not just reading from the slides. That's one thing that we want to try and stay away from, right? You want to have something visually impactful, something that they're going to remember what you were saying to what was on the screen, but not all the words on the screen. And that's probably something that we all already know or knew, but that we can't kind of get away from time to time, putting all of that on the slide and then not rehearsing it enough and feeling like we need to read it from the slide. So what can you do with this dashboard? If you need help on how to be a little bit better on not having repetitive language in each of these areas, there's a link to help you, and it has some great advice and some tools and techniques that you can apply to improve upon that. So as you're rehearsing this, I encourage you to go out to these links and get familiar with what they're recommending, and then try some of those tips, implement some of those techniques, rehearse it again, and take a look at that dashboard. Yeah, I think it would be great, Linda, if you had a graph or something that would tell you where you used those filler words. That would help you to know why are you doing or what are you getting stuck on that maybe you can fix in the next iteration of that. The other thing that I'd like to see in that dashboard is maybe over time how you've improved on those deliveries, right? If there's some way that it kind of keeps a history of it. For now, I take a screenshot of it and I'll put it in my OneNote notebook or put it somewhere that I can reference it and compare it to the next time that I'm practicing that delivery. And this is something that is useful in many ways, right? This is not just that we're presenting some slides in our next board meeting or we're presenting some slides pitching something to a new client. Think about if you are training or if you're aspiring to become a Microsoft certified trainer. This is a great tool for you to practice those scenarios as well. And we have an instructional skills class that I help out with for prospective MCTs. This is part of the pre-work that we have them do before they come to our class. This is one of the assignments is we want you to practice some slides, maybe 5 to 10 slides, take a screenshot, record yourself while you're doing it, and upload that for the instructors to take a look at. It kind of lets us know, where are they at? Where's that person at with their speaking capabilities, with, how they're introducing themselves, how they might be presenting the information. Is it clear? Is it understandable? So that we have a baseline of where they're at and can see how they improve throughout the class before they do their final teach back. So it's also great preparation for anyone that might be going through instructional skills, or if you're the person that's doing that like on the job training, that this is a great place for you to be able to incorporate something like that as well. It's a very cool feature, Michael. Yeah, I agree. It's one of my favorites that they've introduced recently. Google used to have something similar to this. I'm not sure what happened to that tool, but it was really exciting to see something like this that's built directly into the PowerPoint applications. All right, so hopefully that helps you be a little bit better of a presenter, kind of polish up on some of your skills. I recommend you come back to this maybe once every 6 months or a year. Even if you're just presenting the same things over and over again or training on the same things, come back and use this to find those things that you've picked up, those bad habits. Like I'm the one that's always saying, or so, and then that'll help you to kind of get out of those habits. Or if you find that you're starting to speak too quickly, it'll help you get out of those habits. It's also great for if you're speaking to an another part of the world where their language is not the first language that is your language, to help you kind of pace yourself to know, make sure you're kind of slowing down a bit more and give them some time to bring, take in and translate what you have if you don't have a translation tool available to you. All right, hope you like those tips on how to use that tool. We're going to kind of go back to our next topic. So let's close out of rehearsing this for now. Moving on, let's go through some of the things that can be helpful to you. We've already been trying out reactions and polls. Those are some great things to use all throughout your session to make sure you're soliciting feedback and encouraging everyone to participate, not just be that, let me sit back and kind of listen and start to multitask and get off topic of what's really happening here, just to really be focused in on whatever the session is about. So some of the other things that you may want to keep in mind are, what can you do as you're creating this presentation before you deliver it? We already know how we can practice. We already know how we can use Designer, but what about when you're starting to add some other content in here? So if I were in here and I were building my agenda, I'm trying to think through what order would I want to discuss these key points, or how can I tie these things together? Typing can break that creative process sometimes. You might want to be looking at something else on your screen and just kind of talking it through, or you've got some things on your desk and you want to be able to just kind of have that stream of consciousness and talk through what you want and have it put into the slide. And this is something you might already be doing on your phones, and it's available in all of your Office applications. It's called Dictate. So here on the PowerPoint slide on the home ribbon, if we wanted to start kind of gathering our thoughts in this presentation, if I select Dictate, it's now listening to whatever I'm saying and it's typing it into that container. And if I want to move from one container to the next to start entering the information, I can interact with my mouse. Agenda for, and you'll see that it's going to put it right into that area as well. I'll go ahead and stop Dictate. If you've not tried this out yet, it's available in several languages. Mine was already set to English, but I of course could choose the language here and then start the Dictate process, and I'm going to be capturing everything again. So in Word, in Outlook, in PowerPoint, whatever it is you might be working on in Teams, right? We might be working on these things within a team channel. You can use this tool to maybe be a little quicker, or just to be able to get that creative process going a little bit more than if we were typing on the keyboard. Are any of you using Dictate today? Feel free to let me know here in the chat or with a reaction. Might not be using it in this way, but you might be using it on your phone, but hopefully this is another way to help you with that. Okay, so that's again part of the beforehand, how can we get everything into our presentation or into our document that we're working on, or even if you're collaborating with someone, it might be easier for you to do this than typing. So let's move into some of the things that we need to consider as we are working together, as the presentation is happening with each other. This meeting that we're in, let's pretend that this meeting were taking place within Microsoft Teams. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Microsoft Teams. I have another browser here set up that I already have it up in. So let's imagine we're all working in this Atlanta conference. We're going to have a Microsoft 365 conference in Atlanta. I know you're all in Minnesota, most of you are, but let's pretend. So here we are, we're getting this conference together, and we want to have a more collaborative space within Teams, and it's something different than just us typing our notes into a Word document or having a conversation within the post. There's two things that I think can work really well if we're in a meeting like we are here today, or if we're asynchronous, we're not in this meeting and we want to have that conversation or get all those ideas down. Whiteboard is one of them. It was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of great things coming to Whiteboard. So why not bring those things right into your team channel? So if I go up here to the top in this general channel and give this plus sign a click, we can add a whiteboard to this. Now I recommend that you use the whiteboard in the team, especially for those folks that may not be using the desktop app. There are different capabilities in the web app for Whiteboard than there are for the desktop app. So if you're not familiar with this, this might be the place that you want to set this up. We'll give it a name, we'll save it. Once it's done, we'll have that tab right up here in our general channel. We'll give it just a second. And this is our whiteboard. So having this set up before your meeting, before your training, and you could start setting up some sticky notes or some text boxes of the areas, the questions, the places you want to capture things will help. The templates that were discussed about coming up in the future, I'm really excited about that because I think it'll be great for us to have some things that are built around brainstorming or that are built around solving issues, right? Those pre-formatted things that you can just pop in here and move along with it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and click the sticky note, pick a color, we'll draw it, and then we can enter our text and say something like, you know, what's your favorite evening social? And then we can have everyone come in here and fill out these sticky notes or put in here group 1, group 2, group 3, and have different sticky notes. So they know what area are they going to collaborate in. This works really great too if you are in a meeting like we are and you're using breakout rooms. You know, that's one of the things that I had in the list. We're not going to try it out here today, but I could say, okay, the 3 of you are in group 1, you're in group 2, you're in group 3. You're going to go into these breakout rooms, get all of your ideas here on this whiteboard. And when we come back, we're going to have you present that whiteboard so that we can discuss everything. Or if we have it all in one whiteboard, they know what area of the whiteboard to go to. And then we can just move around that whiteboard as we're discussing those things and maybe doing a recap of that. If you're working with something like this, you can also save this. So you can save it as an image later and then follow up with everyone. If they're not sure where to find this, or when you get that attendance report, a great way for you to follow up and send that out as something that you're recapping, or insert it in a OneNote notebook later on as what you got out of that brainstorming session. So whiteboard is really great for kind of capturing those ideas where you can kind of set up what you want on the page. We of course could do the same thing in OneNote. OneNote might have additional capabilities, but for those that aren't familiar with OneNote, I tend to find this toolbar is a little bit more easy to navigate. It's more simplified for them to be able to collaborate in and kind of get those ideas on digital paper, if you will. So that's your whiteboard. Your OneNote notebook, one of the big things that I find that can be helpful if you're working with a notebook in Teams is to have it organized in an easy way for everybody to go right to the information that they need. Again, I love OneNote. I wish everyone knew about OneNote, but not everyone is as familiar with OneNote as some of the other colleagues might be. So you always want to keep that in mind, that you make it easy for them to find the information, that they're not trying to kind of flip through sections and pages or searching for things to find what they need. So my go-to for that is that when you create or set up the notebook that comes with your team, and you'll notice in here that I have a README first, but I don't have a notebook quite yet set up here. When I go to that Add a Tab and I pick OneNote, it's going to present to me the notebook that came with this team when it was created. So you'll notice that's the default notebook. And it's also going to show me a list of these other notebooks that I might want to add within this team channel. I'm going to go with the one that's already associated with this team. Great thing about that is we know the permissions are right for everyone to be able to access everything in there, but I'm going to expand that arrow next to it. And notice that there are some sections that have already been set up. And if you take a look over here, those are the team channels here as well. So what I like to do is create a section that's the same name or something similar to what that channel is about, right? So in this case, it's general. So if we just call it general notes, press enter, creating that section within the notebook. Once that is done, we'll go ahead and save this and set it up within that channel. So there we go. We're going to go ahead and have it post about it in the channel. We'll leave that checked and select save. And so now we're setting that tab up within the notebook. Notebook was already created, right? We just created a section to it. It may notice that it says it already exists, so I might have it already there as well. I'm going to close out of this for now. We'll just take a look in here. I may have had something at some point and then taken it out, so that's okay. We can go over and take a look in one of our other channels here and show you what it would look like there. So here's the announcement notes. Here's the notification about it, that we created that. So awareness for everyone on the team. There's something new here for you to check out. We go to announcement notes. It's going to take them right to that section. So maybe we're asking them to help us plan the dive trip that we're going to do at one of the places in Atlanta, something else, you know, maybe it takes us right to whatever those notes are, the page that we want them to work in. Now, if I expand the navigation where the books are on the bookshelf, here's all of the other channels within the team. So to me, easy navigation for everybody to know how to find their way around the notebook if they're not familiar with it, right? If they're not familiar with OneNote, things that map directly to the channels or specific areas of the team is a logical way for them to find their way around. As they get more familiar with it, then they might get into things like tags, for them to tag like things and be able to find everything based on that tag, or doing those keyword searches to find text, to find recorded audio that matches the keywords, or to find those words that are in pictures or screenshots as well. That's when we're getting into more of that intermediate advanced level kind of stuff. But for beginners, this is kind of what we want to do to make sure that we can get everybody to adopt working in OneNote and make this kind of the place that it's happening. How about your meeting notes? I would love to hear from you. You can come off mute or in the chat. I would love to know, how are you taking meeting notes today? Are you using Wiki within the team channel? Are you using OneNote? Are you taking them in a Microsoft Word document, or do you have some other method? So I see a question coming in as you're typing in your answers. The question is, what version is required for slideshow? Oh, you guys are typing in lots of answers. Thank you. I have to go back now and see if I can find out what the question was. So I might have to come back to that one a little later. Let's see. For slideshow coach, I don't see it in our app. Yeah, so that is going to be either PowerPoint 365, whether that's the desktop app or the web app. You should be able to use it in there. I'd have to check and see if it's available in 2019. I would think that it is, but I'd have to double check on that for you. Hope that helps. Great, so I'm seeing some answers coming in. OneNote, excellent, excellent. Wiki or Word, OneNote every time. I'm with you, Michael. I love OneNote, if you couldn't tell already. All right, trying to use meeting notes too. Yeah, so meeting notes, if we were to take notes in this meeting, it actually establishes a wiki page. So we would have a wiki up here for our meeting notes, and then there would be a page in there for this meeting instance that would list the date and the time, the subject, and then we can start taking our notes in the sections there. So if we wanted to have a section for, let's say, old news, new news, what are we discussing, what are we voting on, whatever it might be, and sponsors, survey, whatever we want to have those sections for, it would do that as a page in the wiki. So it is incorporating wiki. When Teams first came out, it was attached to OneNote. OneNote was the note-taking tool that was part of Microsoft Teams, and it switched to Wiki. What I like to do is I like to have in the channel, if the meeting's taking place in the channel, then have in the section that goes along with that channel a page for meetings. Have a page called meetings, and then you can have sub-pages underneath that for each title of the meeting or whatever you want to do that kind of tells you what that meeting was about. Just because I feel like the search capabilities are there in OneNote, where in Wiki, we didn't have the search capabilities. I haven't checked it lately. Michelle or Michael or anyone else, feel free to jump in if you know if those capabilities are there now. But for the longest time, Wiki did not have the search capabilities. So two different things for you to think about for collaboration and for making sure everybody can find the information they need later on. It's important to be able to search for things. So I think that OneNote might be the differentiator there if you're kind of trying to figure out which way do you want to go with that. But again, Wiki is the one that is connected to the Teams meetings for now. So if someone accidentally deletes a section or a page, is it recoverable? Is that within OneNote that you're wanting to know if it's recoverable? If it is, yes, it is recoverable. It does go into a recycle bin for 60 days. So as long as you've not permanently deleted it from there, you should be able to go into the recycle bin and retrieve it from there as well. It would also depend on how things are syncing as to the possibility of it even being there just a little bit longer, but 60 days is generally the time frame that you have for that. Perfect. Hope that helps. Let me know if you have any further questions on that. Text editing in Wiki is a pain, Catherine. Yes, I hear you. It does have some good formatting capabilities, but not as robust as Microsoft OneNote is or some of the other Office applications are as well. I don't want to beat up on Wiki too much. I still think that Wiki has a great place for things like frequently asked questions or read me first, which is something that I think is great to do in your team channels to help onboard, to kind of let everyone know what's this channel about. Who can I contact if I have questions? What's the structure of the team? Those types of things it's great for. But for meeting notes and more collaborative things, I kind of think that OneNote is the better place to go with that. Great. All right. So moving on, one of the other things that I'd like for us all to try out, I'm going to switch back to our presentation. So give me just a second here. I can get this to come back up for us. So going back to this presentation, I mentioned to you that I wanted all of you to have your phones, your tablets available if you want to play along, if you want to participate in this with me. And that is if I want to present this live. So we're going to take a look at how we can work with this. And give me just a moment. Let me get to where we need to be. So in the upper right corner of PowerPoint for the web, this is one of those things that's a bit hidden. And even for me, if I don't use it frequently enough, I forget where it is. So you might want to take a note of this if this is something you want to try. It's up near the present. You'll notice you also have present down here. But in this one in the upper right corner, you have rehearse with coach. So another place for you to find rehearse with coach if you're not seeing it on your ribbon. And then you have what's called present live. And that's what we're going to try out. So with Present Live, this gives you a way to interact with me directly in the presentation. So of course, I know I'm sharing my screen with you in this Teams meeting, but imagine if this were another tool that I were using to share my screen, or if we were in a room, most of us are there together, but we've got a few people that are connecting in from somewhere else. It gives us all a way to kind of participate in this at the same time. And I've got a couple other things to show you with that as well. So if you want to try it out with me, you can take a picture of the QR code. Or if you want to open a new tab in your web browser, you can type in the web address that's at the top. The 0 that you see in the upper right corner is telling me how many people have joined this presentation with me. So if we have 1 or 2 that do join, you'll be able to hear me through this, through your web browser. So if we weren't in this meeting, this would be a different way for me to share this and for you to follow along with it. I also have the opportunity to choose what I want to have as my language, so that I have subtitles in the proper language to go along with this. And once I start showing the slideshow, so everybody could already hear me, my microphone would already be live, and here's what everyone would see in their web browser. They're seeing my slide, we've got the subtitles at the bottom. I didn't choose a different language than English, but if I had, before going in here, then we would have the translation happening there as well. Oh, sorry about that, you don't have access to the live presentation, I'm not sure. Oh, well, that's a bummer. Well, thanks for everybody for letting me know. Might be just some gremlins happening here in my training environment today that it's not properly sharing that with you.
Well, I think Heather, I saw that it said you need to be a part of the organization.
Oh, that could be it too, Michelle. Thanks for mentioning that. So there might be a setting I need to go in and change for that. Good point. Okay. So if you were part of my organization, you would be seeing this, but and if I can get that fixed in the future, I'll definitely be able to share that out with you again. Sorry about that. But this is what it would look like. If you were applauding, if you were giving a thumbs up, it would pop up on the slide, just like it does here in our Teams meeting. So this was out before we had reactions in our Teams meeting. And it's just a great way that if you don't necessarily have a meeting you're sharing that in, it's another way for you to be able to kind of have that live experience on the web with everyone. Another benefit to this is that if you were the one viewing this and you're like, well, what was that she had on that previous slide? You're able to go back a slide and then you're able to kind of catch up to where we are on the current slide. If I exit out of this, it's no longer available to everyone else that is participating in this with me. So that's a way for us to kind of control when the audience can see it and when they can't. Now, if I press the escape key, you'll notice that it takes me back out to my presentation. It's stopped transcribing my words. And if I want to, I can resume the session. So if we're taking a break, this is a way that I could come out of that and go back into it. Or if I'm done with it, then I can end the session. So a great way for you to have that interaction, have some of the same capabilities, but if it's something that we're not presenting necessarily in a Teams meeting, or even if we are, just a different way to have ways to interact with that. All right. So those are a few of the things. I think we might be getting close to the near event of time, and I did want to leave a few minutes for any final questions that you had. One of my final tips that I will give to you is a unknown little tool or something that you may forget about that you have on your computer if you have a Windows operating system. So Michelle, I loved the timer you had at the beginning of our meeting, and I want to find out later, what are you using for that, or how are you setting all of that up? But if you don't have a tool like that available to you, a simple way for you to put the time up when you're time boxing something, or in between breaks or whatever it might be, use the clock that's on your computer. We always get the questions in our classes that we have, and I'll just pull up the clock. I always get the questions of, what is that you have on your screen? Well, I might just have a timer that's set to a specific time, and then as I'm playing it, I might just make it full screen so it looks a little more something like this. Make it smaller, put it in the corner, whatever I need to do. Just a simple countdown clock, timer, whatever you need to time box what everyone is doing in that session. When you're in your breakout rooms, another way for you to do that, if you have everybody, going through something and do an exercise or gathering their ideas and you're saying you've got 5 minutes, you've got 10 minutes, of course, you can push those messages out to everyone, letting them know when to come back, or you can pop into that breakout room and kind of give them the 2-minute warning, whatever it might be, and kind of gather everyone back into that main room once you're done. Your attendance report, if you've not tried this out yet, this is an example of what it will look like. So if you are the meeting facilitator, if you are running the meeting, you'll have the capability to download that attendance report. It's going to be a CSV file, an Excel file, or what you can work with in Excel like this. I really think that this is great to have. I commonly get that question, like I mentioned at the beginning. I want to be able to capture who was in that meeting with me or who was in that training with me. Is there an easy way for me to do that? I used to like the way that I could do it in Skype for Business, where it would go right into OneNote, or you could do it from Outlook, right? You could go to that meeting details and push that in, but it has the list of everyone that was there, but it doesn't check it off like it used to of who attended the meeting. So this attendance report, I think, is a great thing for you to use, and put it into your OneNote meeting notes. A lot of you are using OneNote. Use this attendance report to do that. And this is a great way for you to follow up with who attended the meeting, or what are those notes, the link to where they can find those notes in that OneNote notebook. If you're driving adoption of this is where our notes are going to be from now on, use your attendance report, post a follow-up, post something with an @ mention in the channel, get their attention, but include a link to get them back to where they can find all that information. Of course, if you're recording the meeting, then it's going to post a lot more information for you within that threaded conversation about it as well. But there's some additional capabilities that I think attendance report is great for. Great question. Who can see the attendance report? Is there privacy rules a company has? Will they be viewable to all? I believe that it's the person that has created the meeting. I don't think that, as a guest that I have permissions. I would have to check on that and get back to you just to make sure I'm not giving you out of date information if anything has changed. But if anyone else knows, please feel free to unmute or put that in the chat. Great question. All right, so just to kind of wrap up what we're discussing at the moment, let me go ahead and swap this around. So a few things that I'd like to call to action for you is, which of the tips and techniques are you going to put into practice today? Is there something new that you learned here today, or a different way to use a tool that you're already using? We'd love to know. If you want to share that in the chat, what are you going to use today? Something else I'd like you to consider is, how many times are you now going to practice your presentation? Is it going to be 10? Is it going to be 200? Is it going to be on the fly? What is it? And are you going to use that presenter coach that I showed you, that you have available to you in both versions of PowerPoint? And then the final thought is, how are you going to continue your learning journey? I know you attend these meetings, right? You attend these meetings every month, but what else do you have available to you to help you with that? If you liked some of the tips I shared with you about presentations or about Microsoft Teams or OneNote, as Michelle mentioned, I have courses on LinkedIn Learning. Feel free to check them out. Got just a few here on the screenshot that are available. And then if you have questions, feel free to follow up with me. I know there's a couple questions that I mentioned that I could get back to you on. Feel free to reach out to me at any of these, and I'll be glad to follow up with you with the answers that I have. So I'll open up for questions and hand it back over to Michelle.
Awesome job. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Michelle. Presenter coach seems to be the popular one. Excellent. Glad to hear it. And feel free to unmute or repost a question if there's something I missed.
So my ideal, Heather, would be, I always use OneNote for adding my meeting details, and I can then check mark when somebody attended or not attended. I love if that was just automatic by connecting back from the Teams attendance report and check mark in my OneNote. Oh, you're on mute.
sorry, not sure how that happened. Say that one more time, Michelle. What was your ideal?
Oh, my ideal would be I use OneNote and I always add meeting details, and then I open up the participant pane and I check mark who's in the room.
Yep.
But it'd be great if the team's attendance report would connect back to my OneNote and check mark those for me.
Yes, I agree. I feel the same way. And when we used to have Skype for business meetings, like it would, I remember at some point there was something that would do that where it's already checked for you as to who was in the meeting with you. Yeah, I think it would be awesome if there was some connectivity there to do that.
Yep.
For sure. And apologies, I think when I started my present live, yeah, I missed something in here for the settings, but thanks for pointing that out, that there are some settings as to whether it's within the org or outside of the org.
Yeah, so the PowerPoint timer feature, maybe Don, or no, actually Don's on hold, so he's probably attending another meeting. So first, I used Nick Stilling's PowerPoint deck. He's got it out there in one of his sways that he does, and basically, it's now this is the first iteration, right? Crawl, walk, run. And the first one was about 500 PowerPoint slides that I just had collapsed that just would animate to the next slide, to the next slide, to the next slide. And then the timer would just change from page to page.
Right.
And then Donald noticed, hey, why do we have 500 slides when he started to do the feature announcements with me in the message center post? He's like, let's just put a timer on there. And I'm like, yeah, all right, okay. You know, and so it actually is just a timer that's built right on the deck. I just always have to be sure I move the agenda over so it doesn't cover it. But it's just, again, a timer, much like Heather, you showed. It's just a timer built in and added inside of PowerPoint.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, there's some other tools out there that have timers in it for time boxing that are whiteboard type of tools. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping in the future that they'll incorporate something like that too into Whiteboard where we have that timer, right? So that we don't have to go into the breakout room and say, hey, you've got 5 minutes, come on back, you know, that we can just have something doing a countdown there as well.
Yep.
One other creative idea I've seen used on that concept is if you get a little creative with Canvas Power Apps, you can make it operate much like PowerPoint, but then you've got the full functionality of all the app making features like, you know, timers and clicking buttons and having to jump out to other pages interactively within the app instead of having to jump out of PowerPoint in order to do it, that I've seen used pretty well in certain circumstances.
Cool.
That's a great suggestion, Jeremy. He's saying it'd be great to have a countdown meeting time and then switch to bold red when the meeting's gone too long.
Yeah.
I would definitely suggest that in user voice.
Or like a red border that just flashes around the meeting room or something. Yeah.
Yep, and then you could like add 5 more minutes to it or kill the meeting.
Yeah.
Nash lasers. I love it. All right, well, if anyone has any questions left for Heather, be sure to put it to the meeting chat. And Heather, if you have to go, I can send them over. And then we do have Q&A at the end. If anybody wants to come off mute, feel free to. And again, thank you so much, Heather. We loved having you. We hope you come back and maybe even submit for admin day. We'd love to see what would be like a 90-minute session on anything, you know, Microsoft Teams or that you've done. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't do much admin stuff, but anything else, Teams, happy to do it.
You got it.
All right.
All right.
I'll stick around though.
Okay, great. All right, next we have Bart Sneary talking about Dynamics 365. If you didn't know what the D was when we posted it on the site, Dynamics 365 and Teams, Better Together story. The reason I asked Bart is we had a lot of requests for learning about Dynamics, but also how does it integrate with Teams? And I think we just have a fantastic story lately around the Teams capabilities that are built and added into Dynamics, which is really cool and interesting. So with that, I'll pass it over to Bart. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. And certainly wish I would have seen Heather's presentation about 5 days ago, and you would have gotten a better experience here for this half of the user group. But we'll do the best with what we've got. So I will start off just by making sure I can share my screen here. And Of course, we should start with just a little tee up on the presentation side. And of course, I've got this display settings we need to switch. Now, I think you're actually seeing the slideshow. Let's just minimize that. All right. So there is quite a bit of investment that has gone on in trying to connect up Dynamics 365 for where you keep a lot of your customer information and other kind of engagement related data in terms of how you interact with your customers. And Teams, which is really the collaboration tool, especially internally, but even sometimes with customers or partners or other kind of co-selling or co-supporting type organizations that you might want to deal with. So figuring out how to keep these tools as connected as possible has been a big task and a big ask from our production development teams on both sides, the Dynamics side and the Microsoft Teams side. But they've done a pretty slick job, and I'm going to show you a lot of what's there that you could utilize today, and talk about a couple things that are a little bit pre-release that we don't quite have functional yet, but we have announced. I won't be able to show you some of those, but I'll be able to talk through some of those. And then I would continue to watch this area because I think Microsoft is going to continue the pace at which we are bringing these two platforms together, because we see great synergies bringing great things to organizations. In fact, one of the things that I think is kind of cool is that we've done quite a bit of analysis on kind of what COVID and the whole lockdown has done to the way people work, and that workers are now taking part in twice as many teams as they did just a few years back. So you are having to work in more and more and more ad hoc teams to get stuff done, and Teams is the place to get work done in those scenarios, of course. We also have seen that the average information worker has seen their task list grow significantly in terms of what they have to get done. So the more task switching, especially from an app perspective, they have to do, the less efficient they are as they have to get more and more things done in more and more teams as they work. And that the companies who have invested in collaboration and teamwork scenarios, like making sure Microsoft Teams works really well, they are 5 times more likely to be high performing in this culture than when we were working in scenarios where things weren't quite as high paced, especially in an online only fashion, and there were more in-person things going on. So again, we just see that the world has shifted, and connecting these so that you have to do a lot less task switching and app switching in order to accomplish a lot of collaborative scenarios around relevant customer situations is the goal that we're trying to drive. So I'm going to kind of break this into 3 separate parts. So the first section that I'll be covering is what does it look like in more of a Teams-centric scenario? So if you are more or less a Teams worker and that is the tool that you use to get things done and that's where you spend a lot of your day, how can we expose Dynamics information from within Teams to make it as collaborative as possible for a Teams-centric experience? So that's kind of phase 1. Phase 2 is we do have a really interesting integration between Teams as a great platform to host meetings in many different types, and Dynamics 365 marketing in terms of getting a message out that is on the right message from a branding perspective and from the right people to put the right message behind it in terms of crafting the scenario for what the wording should look like and all those kind of things, and has a pretty sophisticated engine for making sure it can send those messages at the right times to the right people and then know what they are doing in real time to kind of interact as a marketing platform should to engage with them more. So if they clicked into a meeting and then left, it could realize that and like ping them again saying, hey, we noticed you left, get feedback from why they left or re-invite them back in or whatever you might want to do as follow-ups when a meeting is ended, all those kind of things. As a marketing platform, you've got information about what has gone on in the actual meeting in Teams that has gone on and can react to that with other messaging. So I'll give you a quick preview of that. And then I'll jump into what's it look like from a Dynamics user perspective, if that's the primary tool that they use as a salesperson or as a support agent, and that they're spending most of their day working on their customer information or opportunities or cases or whatever it is that they are supposed to work on as a worker. How can they stay in Dynamics but still leverage a lot of the team's capabilities? So those are the three major topics that I'll be jumping into in that order. And I plan to do just a little bit of tee up like I'm doing now in presentation mode, and then I'm going to jump in and show you a little bit about the user experience, and then I'll even jump a little further under the covers to show you a little bit about the administrative experience, because I have a hunch in this user group we got a lot of people who need to do a little bit more of that setup and administration of the platforms to enable the end users to do what they need to do. So I'll try to hit all three of those topics in all of those ways, and keep me honest. All right, if I'm going to be Teams centric and embed these Dynamics records, kind of what's that look like? How does it work? So the tee up here is really just saying we want Teams to continue to be that collaboration hub for the people who use it that way, but to be able to not only have it be the kind of cross-functional collaboration area where we can expose some Dynamics information inside of Teams, but also have all of the files that you may want to collaborate around be stored in Teams and available in Dynamics kind of seamlessly, so that users that are centric in either application can collaborate on that file capability equally well. So that's sort of the things that I want to try to get across. And then, of course, when you expose some Dynamics data, you not only want to be able to access and kind of work with that Dynamics data from within the Teams UI, but still collaborate on it with the Teams features like persistent chat and all the other kind of cool things that you can do inside of Teams to collaborate around information. So we'll look at that in just a little bit. So here we go. Get out of PowerPoint mode for the moment and jump into Teams. So any questions about any of this before I just kind of jump in and start showing stuff? I'm used to people being able to come off mute and just blurt things out, so feel free to do that if you have any. Otherwise, I will jump in. So my prep here is I came into a Teams environment, and I have a team that I am a member of, Bart and Corey Dev in this case, and I created a brand new channel, the 365 UG, that really has nothing in it. And the first thing I'm going to do is say, well, I think I'd like to expose some Dynamics data in here that we should collaborate on. So all I really have to do is the same thing I would do for just about any other app, is come in here, and if my administrator has loaded the Dynamics 365 app, and we'll talk about that from an administrator standpoint a little bit, all I really need to do is just click on it, and it'll start the process of saying, okay, someone has already connected this Teams instance for this user to a specific Dynamics organization and app within that organization. And I'm just going to pop out first to show you kind of what that looks like. So in my overall tenant up here, this is going to show me all of the various Dynamics instances that I have available in my tenant. And I happen to have a tenant that has quite a few of these, so I could have picked any of the actual Dynamics instances where we're collaborating around customers as the instance that I want to surface data from. And then within that instance, kind of what is my kind of job centered around? Am I a seller? Or if I was customer service, I could choose the customer service hub. Or if I was field service, I could choose connected field service. Or if I was doing something specific with Adobe, that, you know, I've got all kinds of different things that I could choose from. I'm just going to stick with the sales hub because it has kind of the most relevant data in this particular organization. And I can tell it to remember this, or I don't have to. And since I didn't make any changes, it's not going to actually change anything for me. So I'm just going to close this. But if I had made some changes there, it would have saved those so that this would reflect what I just selected for the organization and app inside of the Dynamics framework that I was connecting to. And once I've decided then I want to surface something, I've got two different ways I can surface data. I can surface data about a data object, you know, a contact, a lead, an opportunity. I've got a few different things just from some recent things that I have clicked on that just show up here. So it's kind of nice that my recently used items just are there. I can also search and filter and do all kinds of other things to pick the appropriate data object to expose. There are other scenarios where it makes more sense to say, well, what I would rather do is show a view of information, like what are my inactive accounts, or what are the customers, or my vendors. I've got a few different ways that I might show, a whole list of records that we might need to collaborate on as a sales team, or as whatever group of people have gotten together that might want to work on these things. So I can expose either. Both are fine. I should mention, this is kind of off the cuff and it has been announced, and I don't know exactly when the license entitlement starts, but the new news around this is that data that you expose in this way, so the person exposing it has to have a Dynamics license in order to be able to hook into this org and expose the piece of data to the rest of the people who are members of this team and can see that information. From that point forward, all the people in this team who are able to see that record or list of records that got exposed will be able to interact with it and still change, update, modify the data, add new data if it's needed for things like extra activities that may have been taken around the record, and store all of that information in Dynamics without having to buy a Dynamics license for those users who are doing that collaboration around what got shared. So that is big news from a licensing standpoint. That is the first time I've seen us take a stance like that and not require you to buy a Dynamics license in order to manipulate Dynamics data of any kind. And so there will, I'm sure, be nuance and some extra rules around that forthcoming at some point, but the kind of the scenario is if somebody on the team has access to it, they can expose it, then the other people on that team can continue to interact with it without having to buy extra licensing. So I am going to go back just for simplicity and say, well, let's just expose the Michelle Gilbert contact record. And as soon as I hit save here, it should go query that Dynamics and that Dynamics instance and find the Michelle Gilbert contact record, and it's connecting it. And so it doesn't just display it. So this is much more than just an iframe. It's going to show the record in an interactive state, and it also under the covers is doing all the other back-end server-to-server plumbing needed to do all the collaboration stuff, like the file sharing and the ability to do chats around this record and all those kind of things. And you can see you've got a fairly rich experience here now in that I'm able to come in and, I could just quickly add data here. I'm not actually going to type because I'm not a great typist on the fly, but I could go put Michelle's job title and change other data around on her record. I could come over here on this timeline and I could add, new tasks or phone calls that need to be made, appointments we're going to go have, whatever else I might want to do. I can manipulate a lot of this data right from here. But I can also do the kind of persistent chat around it and say, all right, that just started a new tab in this channel that's saying, let's welcome Michelle to the customer base, or whatever we might want to say. And so at that point, I've now started some persistent chat around this record that will, if I've done this right, just show up right in the normal chat interface, and everyone else in Teams, they don't have to pull it open if they don't want to. They can just continue to interact in the persistent chat feature. But if they want to click in to see the full record and still have access to whatever got chatted back and forth, they absolutely could go do that, and bring the whole piece back open and, of course, close it back up, jump out to it purely in the web. If they don't want to work on it in Teams, they've got a few other things that they can do to interact with the data without leaving Teams now, because this data is sitting here. And so that is a quick romp through some of the kind of user experience of what it might be like. And most of the time you wouldn't do this around like a contact record. You would probably do it around a sales opportunity or a customer service case or a marketing campaign or some other object that makes a little more sense to try to work on as a team and bring to fruition, closure, whichever way you want to be looking at that. So pretty cool stuff to try to make that team centric. So let me show you quickly, if you were an admin and you needed to worry about the Teams apps out there, that this team app is the Dynamics 365 app. And there is one other feature that I'll just quickly mention. So if you actually clicked on the Dynamics 365 app in the app list, not only can you come in here and try to set some of these settings for what is the standard environment and app that people would typically connect up to, but as a user, I can actually come in and say, well, what is the typical dashboard I would like to look at so that I could see, the sales activity dashboard or the sales performance dashboard, or which kind of graphical representation of my look at the world from a Dynamics perspective is the most relevant one for me in my work. And that way, as a Dynamics user, if I happen to be in Teams, I can just click on the Dynamics app and I can still kind of look at what's usually top of mind for me. And I can still navigate around kind of the entire app from here, that I am not limited to just what showed up on my dashboard there. I can click around and use the entire Dynamics app from within Teams just by clicking on it that way. Of course, if I came back to my normal channel, that I can still see the specific record that I had exposed out here as well. So that's there. Now the admins, if you need to find Dynamics 365 and it doesn't already show up in your admin center, I'll just quickly mention, if you're not familiar with AppSource, it's a fantastic repository of all sorts of apps across all of Microsoft. And I just did a search for Dynamics 365 in AppSource. And of course, there were thousands of things that came back because all of the apps that are relevant for Dynamics, not just for Teams, showed up there. But I just opened up the M365 product filter, clicked on Teams, and then it was the first one that showed up so that I could easily click on it and just say, get it now. I can see it's a Teams app, and that should bring it into your Teams repository of apps so you can give the right users permissions to utilize it from that point forward inside of Teams. So that's most of the Teams-centric stuff that you need to do in order to make this very usable by any of your Teams users. But there is one other thing that someone in the organization has to go do before you can actually make all that work. And that is, let's see, I think this will still work. Someone needs to go into the Power Platform Admin Center, and this is something that there's about 8 different ways you can do. But if you're in the Admin Center, I am working in this MTC Hero Prod environment, so I'll just click into that to make administrative settings come to life here. And if I click on settings, one of the things that shows up here is integration. And if I click on the Teams integration capability, somebody needs to tick this box to on to say that model-driven apps, which is what Dynamics 365 actually is, and this actually lets you see that you don't have to have it be a complete first-party app in order for this to work, that you can pick environments and other model-driven apps from just your Power Apps repository for this base level integration. To do more advanced stuff, you do have to have the full-on Dynamics first-party stuff, but the base integration, more or less like what I just showed, will work just by ticking this on, and that will allow people to choose those environments and apps also. So there are other settings, and I'll get into those a little bit later, but if someone's done this, you've got the Dynamics app inside of Teams, you've got the user experience that I kind of just showed for being able to do all that collaboration stuff and to be able to work in a very Teams-centric world. I'm going to pause before I go on to the next topic and say, any questions, anything anyone wants to dive into in that realm before I move on?
Yeah, I guess I had a question, Bart. What is the best practice about what environment to use?
So the environment will be where your actual customer data is. And for every organization, that is a little bit different. And sometimes it'll be different for sales than it is for customer service, or maybe even 2 or 3 different sales organizations within the same tenant. You know, that you might have one group that sells to the federal government and another group that sells to commercial entities, and they have completely separate Dynamics instances or model-driven Power Apps that they use. So wherever your real data is that you want to collaborate on is what you would typically choose there as your default environment for users to use. But users can always go change that if they happen to work in a different one that they want to expose data from.
Got it. Thank you.
So yeah, when I was back over here, as a user, I can always click on this, and even though it's going to default to that one, I can always just click this and switch to a different environment if I actually wanted to grab one out of dev and collaborate on, you know, something coming from the customer service hub in my dev instance. I could just go do that and surface a record from a whole different Dynamics organization in this exact same team if there was a good reason to. So whichever data you have access to as a user is what will show up in that drop-down list. Cool. Anything else? One thing that used to be here and is in the process of being reworked so that it will be more functional, but it's kind of deprecated and not functional right now, is when you install this Dynamics 365 Teams app, it used to deploy a bot so that you could actually just ask questions of the Dynamics bot about your Dynamics data, and it would surface information and let you sort of manipulate it in small little cards that were responsive cards. So that will come back, I'm pretty sure, in a future iteration, maybe even later this calendar year, but I can't commit to exact timing on it at this point. So watch for that if you do have quite a bit of Dynamics data and you'd like that bot capability. All right, I'm going to switch gears then for a moment and say, if I were a marketer, I can just come out here into my Dynamics, and I'm actually going to stay in this same MTC Hero production instance and just choose the marketing app. So it's actually going to work on the same customer data that I was just showing from a sales perspective, but this will be marketing centric. And it's going to start in my get started pane here just because that's what opens first, but I'm just going to come down and say, if I were looking at events, that I could come out and say, well, I do in fact want to have a new event, and I probably would make a template for this in the real world so that I had all kinds of other stuff already stored about, you know, what type of event is this and a few other things. But the most important part is when I start to create an event, I can say, well, I do think I want to make this an online event that is streamable online. And so once I do that, it's going to do a quick authentication to make sure that my Dynamics instance and the user that I'm logged into here has access to the Teams capabilities. And now I can schedule, it'll default to webinars because we think that's the kind of richest experience from a data perspective to interact with, and that you invite people and they register for it and you track whether they attend and all that kind of stuff that gets tracked in webinars, where we can still do this in a Teams meeting, but it's a little less formal on the registration side of things typically. Or we can do a live event if it's something that needs to hit, you know, a whole bunch of people and you want a little more control over presenting without allowing people to come off mute and some of those kind of things. So all of those Teams modalities are supported here. And I just, you know, pick the appropriate one, and I can set a lot of the Teams features as I'm going to schedule the meeting, and then send, you know, once I've saved this and activated this event as one that's going live, then it will send the invite, and I can be creative with how I want those to work, and it will schedule all of the Teams side of it for me and keep track of the data that I then care about from a registration and attendance and post-event capabilities. And I don't know how many of you have worked at all with Teams, with Dynamics marketing, but we've got this entire customer journey orchestration capability that we can watch for various events to happen and look at triggers and if-then statements and take real dynamic paths through data to really make more out of the meetings and be very engaging with customers. And we can do this in one of two ways. There's the kind of traditional customer journey orchestration that is pretty asynchronous, and it works fairly quickly because it is still API based, but you're probably not going to do anything that's going to react in real time to what people do. But we do have another thing called the real-time journey orchestration tool, and that's easiest to find on my Get Started tab. And if I choose to go to the real-time marketing area, it'll tell me I have to switch from outbound marketing to real-time marketing here. And if I look at customer journeys from the real-time perspective, this is doing things like in-app notifications and sending SMS texts and push notifications that can actually try to engage someone within a second of the time they do some action that I care about with whatever the right message is in one of those modalities that is meant to grab their attention and sort of nudge them back where you want them in real time. So both of those are options to orchestrate your customer journeys with and invite people to your meetings that are still hosted inside a team. So I actually mentioned offline to Michelle earlier that if you did this instead of Eventbrite for hosting this meeting, that Dynamics Marketing may have been able to get the appropriate message sent out when you wanted it to. We'll have to wait and see if the group is able to get a license that will meet their needs for this to work. So I don't know all the details on the licensing. I'm not a licensing specialist, but that's kind of what that marketing integration looks like, to use Dynamics Marketing combined with the team meeting hosting functionality.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. I think we're going to have to look into that if Eventbrite does not want to play well with our user group.
I hope Dynamics Marketing will if you get the chance to use it. Happy to help in some of the setup if you go there, because there is a little bit of background, back-end stuff that you want to configure right in order to make it private and adhere to all the appropriate rules around data privacy and can spam rules and all those things, because it really is a full-fledged marketing tool instead of just an events-only tool. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so I kind of blew right through the marketing content, but I think you got to see it live, and what's the point in looking at a slide when you can see it in the tool exactly the way it really works? So you kind of get the same idea there. But let's go through the next thing that is actually live. So it doesn't want to keep my orchestration in the right screens. Inside of Dynamics is where I'm going to move next. And the first thing that I'm going to highlight is that inside of Dynamics, because it is meant to be the sales enablement tool and or customer service enablement tool, and on both sides of that, the selling and on the servicing, you probably are doing a lot of telephone calls to set appointments, deal with customers, talk about issues, whatever the case may be. And that if you're doing a lot of calling, if you would allow Teams to be your telephony tool, this one does in fact require PSTN calling to be enabled in order for it to have its full featured capability. But we have this embedded dialer experience where you can click to call and it'll start a UI that gives you call controls and all kinds of things like that. But it also has some AI running, and it uses some Teams transcription capability to record and transcribe the call and run AI across it and look for competitive words, look for action items that you might have, allow you to take notes while talking to the customer and have access to all of that information about what that call was related to what customer and what opportunity or case or whatever other data object that call related to, all stored contextually, with the ability for a manager to quickly just pull up that call that related to that data record and date and time stamped and everything else, and watch it together and look at sort of all the information that got stored about that call. So pretty cool stuff to help make sure that both the customer experience can be really cool, you don't miss things that were mentioned on either side of the call, and that managers have some interesting tools for coaching, kind of all rolled into one. So I'll show you what this looks like in just a minute. It's in preview, so it's not quite ready for full prime time, but it does work in sales and customer service scenarios, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Trying to think. I think I mentioned all of these things, that it is the dialer. You can take notes by hand and it will be doing the full transcription for you of all the things that got noted, including highlighting any of the words that look like either action items or competitive things that you have identified ahead of time as something that it might want to flag. And that's what that automatic detection of the action items piece means. The other thing that is actually pretty cool, and this one I have not tried, so I don't have anything prepared already to show you. But if you schedule a Teams meeting, not through the marketing module, but just schedule a Teams meeting and you join it from clicking on that record inside of Dynamics to log on to your Teams meeting, that it will actually record that entire meeting that was scheduled, not just a phone call, but an entire meeting of whoever was there, and the transcript of that and all the things that were mentioned and conversational APIs and commitments and follow-ups and all that kind of stuff, and recorded and ready to play it back. So not just the outbound phone call, but actual scheduled meetings with as many participants as join can be tied into this as well. So let's go back to demo mode. I am going to drop out of the marketing module, and for now I'm just going to hop back into the sales hub because it's the easiest place for me to just quickly grab stuff. And I'm going to go to my contacts area here, and I'm going to.
Bart, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, sure.
Asking, will it bring up a caller's information if a call comes in? And how about meetings that are scheduled with the participants?
So those two things I'm going to tease apart as two different things. So the inbound calls, it's not pre-wired up today to handle screen pop. So it won't pop open this Teams calls preview when my phone rings, so that I have a way to answer it and show me all of the caller's information with doing the lookup of their data and related records. So I think that may be on our roadmap, although we haven't publicly disclosed that the Teams functionality. I would see that being a logical jumping off point. However, if you schedule a meeting in Dynamics, that we do have a capability in our AI functionality that I don't think I've got a meeting sitting right here ready to show you. But if I had a meeting that was scheduled for like tomorrow, that in this assistant, when I click on that meeting, that's exactly what it's going to show me. Is it's going to say, okay, here is the meeting date and time and place. And if you are actually having to do something where it's not an online meeting, but something in person, it'll kind of show you the map with driving directions of how to get there. And whoever is a participant in that meeting, it will show you their contact information with one click to get to their full contact information. Typically in Dynamics, if you schedule a meeting, you actually set it related to a sales opportunity or a customer service case or a quote or whatever other kind of data object you are supposed to be having a meeting around. It'll pull that information in and show you all of the detail around whatever that data object that is the topic that that meeting is all about. And it just exposes all of that in a very clean, easy to see interface before you go or click into the meeting. And then when you join, it will be a very similar experience to what you see me click into in terms of the actual call experience here in a second. Hopefully that gave you some idea of where those are. I'm going to have Michelle be my demo buddy here, and I'm going to say, well, why not pick on Michelle for this? It'll also make sure I don't have to talk on my cell phone while talking to you on both the Teams meeting and this other phone call, and make it a little bit cleaner. So Michelle, if you don't have your cell phone handy, you might want to grab it because I'm just about to call you from this fictitious persona. So because I've got her phone number stored in here in a phone field, I've got click to dial set up. All I need to do is click this little button that looks like a phone, and it's gonna start the process. Well, hello, Michelle. How are you today? So that is something you can turn on or off in terms of the prompting. I've got it set to automatically prompt. So Michelle, you are now aware we are recording this call. So thanks for being willing to be my guinea pig. I'm just going to assume that this feature doesn't exist for Salesforce in order to have all these normal Teams pops coming wide open and analyzing all of the data coming from a Salesforce record, because I don't think that's been built at this point. And I did that on purpose because I think we can just hang up and I'll show you what this looks like, other than I'll just take a quick note. Awesome. All right. So it was pretty easy for me to click in. You could see I have my little note-taking capability. If I had clicked into the transcript, I could have seen all these things that were going on and notice that it's highlighting, okay, I am talking with Michelle, so it's going to highlight that. And I had told my system when I set it up, and I'll show you what this looks like from an admin perspective here in just a few minutes, that whenever I mention Salesforce, I'd like you to highlight that because that's a competitor of ours. I could set it up for whatever competitors made sense, but it just kind of recognized that. So it's highlighting those things for me. And as I click into this, it's still doing a little bit of the AI on this, but it's now kind of showing me again my entire transcript of everything that we said. And we've got some nice KPIs. So my talk to listen radio is not good. I'm talking 91% of the time and only listening 9% of the time. I'm not a very good seller. I need to switch those around. I'm talking fairly fast, 214 words a minute. There were 8 different switches in terms of the presenter talking in our conversation. The average pause was a little longer than it should have been, and part of it was because we were waiting on the prompt to finish all that kind of stuff. But once this finishes processing, I could play back the recording of the call. It looks like it's getting closer to allowing me to do playbacks and move back and forth. If it had detected that we were doing something that required follow-up and that I needed to have a task recorded to call our next Thursday or send the quote after the fact or whatever, that it will detect action items that I need to take, and it will sort of hint that these are here and I should just click on it and schedule it. And it then also comes in and shows me highlights that once it's finished processing, it'll have a little bit of that data. I don't think in our conversation we did anything that it's going to have as an action item, but it'll probably show like Michelle's name and Salesforce highlighted a couple of times in there once it does its thing. So I'm not going to sit here and wait for it to do all of its processing. It usually does it in about 2 minutes from the time.
Can you stop for a second?
Yeah.
Bart, and talk to the sentiment, and can you answer, is this using sentiment analysis in Azure?
So I don't believe that this is highlighting, well, I guess it is going to highlight sentiment. So it is using Azure services behind the scenes, that this is some Teams, some Dynamics, some Azure, all kind of coming together to try to deliver a pretty cool experience that brings the best of Microsoft to bear on phone interactions for sellers and service agents and managers of them. But all of that is kind of invisible to the people who did all the configuring, in that we store these calls in a Microsoft managed storage account, and we do all the AI without you having to do a whole lot to train it other than what I'm about to show you. Some of what you're seeing here is a premium service, and some of it is closer to standard stuff, and I'll kind of show you where to see some of that stuff in the admin console in a minute too. Anyway.
There's a question about how long are call recordings stored by default?
Yeah, I would have to go look that up to be definitive about it, but my best guess is it's either 90 days or 6 months, but I don't know that for sure. I'd have to go figure that out. And this is a feature that is still in preview, so even if we had made some introductory announcement, that I would wait till it's generally available to be secure on knowing what that answer is.
And I'll look it up in the same time and see if I can't find any information on it.
Well, we do have a few options there too. So let me actually just click in and show you some of this. So that's the first thing that I'm going to show you around the Dynamics piece in terms of that call integration. And if I went here as a seller, and I actually am logged in with an account that has some admin capabilities. So if I come over here and I just say, I want to look at my Teams integration settings, that this part isn't what was just used, although this first checkbox here, like the first two actually. Now the first one, that top one, I believe is the same checkbox that we saw back in the Power Platform Admin Center, only this one is only Dynamics records. The one in the Admin Center turned it on for Dynamics records and other model-driven apps. Then there is an enhanced Teams integration that lets you do a lot of the connecting of records from within Dynamics into the Teams user interface from the Dynamics UI. You don't have to be in Teams in order to do it if you turn on the enhanced Teams integration, and that's pretty much the enhancement. And I'll show you how to do that in just a minute because that's kind of the next phase. And part of that is on and part of that is not turned on yet. So I can try to describe some of the differences. And then we do have the ability, once we can create these teams from the Dynamics UI, to still do things like put confidential labels on what we create. So those are all functions that I can control from the admin console from within Dynamics here. And I think I just saw the guest question there, that is the recipient of the call aware of the recording, transcription, and analysis? And I'll let Michelle answer. Did you hear a prompt on your phone about that the call was being recorded?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right when I said hello, it said this call will be recorded.
Perfect.
And
so,
the question about opting out, it did not ask for me to opt out. I think the opting out, anytime somebody hits record, is just turn it off, end the call.
Right. So the actual call recording feature shows up here as this thing called Conversation Intelligence. And this is a premium feature of the selling capabilities called Sales Insights. So if I click into Conversation Intelligence here, we have a few options on the admin side for how things actually work. So I can turn it on or off in terms of just the Teams call recordings in general. So if I don't want to use this feature, it's pretty easy to turn the whole thing off. Then I can decide which people, so which security roles is the way we do it. So who do I want to turn this on for? And it may only be a subset of my users, so I may want to turn it on for my inside sellers, but not my field sellers. And so I make sure that the inside sellers have a different security role and make sure that that's the only one that it got turned on for. Now, we have a few different options around that call recording. So I have it set automatic, but that a user could stop it if they wanted to. And I don't know if you remember in the user interface when that popped open and the call got announced and things, I did have the ability that I could toggle a switch off to stop the recording if I figured out that the person on the other end of the line didn't want to be recorded and I didn't want them to just hang up. I could have just stopped it, but I can turn off that capability if my organization doesn't want the employee to have that function. So all of those are configurable options. And then this also is an option on whether you want that announcement of the call recording to be given just to your internal user or just to the field receiving partner, person, whatever the remote party is, or how that's supposed to work. So that's all configurable. Then this is kind of the next part. So if we use Microsoft provided storage, I guess this is our answer. We can either make it 30 days or 90 days for how long calls get stored if we store in the Microsoft provided storage repository that just comes with the service. If you decide to throw it in your own Azure data storage, then set your own retention policy for whatever you want it to be. You've got a whole bunch of different options, essentially, if you're paying for the storage instead of the services provided storage. So we did give you options on call recording and where you store it and how long automatically. Then this is where I can go in and add keywords that I want to track, competitors I want to track, what languages I expect my speakers to be in to make sure that we can accurately transcribe all those various things. So I get to set a lot of that stuff up. And we have some ability to control data privacy and consent options. I'm actually not going to read through all of those for you, but we can allow that to be controlled here at the organization level. Again, this was a premium feature, and we had, I guess, 600,000 hours turned on when we turned it on for this entire tenant. I believe it might be organizational, but I think it, yeah, I don't know where the hours get allocated. I haven't looked at the licensing on it. And then if I want new features to show up when they're in preview still, which is the only way this would have worked because everything's in preview, is I have to check the coming soon box. But once it goes generally available, if I want to see preview features in this org because it's a dev org, then I can have that box checked. And if I want to not see it in my production org until it's generally available, I can uncheck that box. And those are sort of the configuration items among what administrators just have checkbox ability to control for features in all of that analysis. All right. Any other questions around this part of what's there in the integration? I guess it's almost there in the integration. It's in preview. You can test it out in non-production ways these days. Awesome. So when I was back over here and I looked at my Teams integration, I have all of the features turned on. So I'm going to show you more of now what in my presentation I was going to show as saying we've got dynamics centric features that are there, and I'll show you what's there today, and then I'll tell you about what's coming soon in just a moment. So if I come out of my settings area and just go back to the normal seller information here, I am gonna, this time, let's just go pick on a sales opportunity, and I'll just kind of grab one at random. How about a 3D printer inquiry? That looks like a good one to have. So if I were looking at this particular opportunity and I wanted to collaborate with a whole team of people, whether they were Dynamics users or not, about this, that when that premium feature has been turned on, I get a new button that shows up in my Dynamics instance that says, I would like to do some collaborating on this particular opportunity. And when I do, it's going to say, all right, so you want to use Teams, huh? Let's do it. It's going to have to ask a few questions. You can either use an existing team, which is what I'm going to do in my scenario, but it allows you to create a brand new team. And if you want to, knock yourself out in this case. But I have one here that I'm just going to use. And then, of course, which channel do I want to use? Well, why not the UG channel that I've created for this meeting? And then it's going to allow me to say, well, do I have any other teammates that have access to this record in Dynamics that I want to make sure have access in the Barton Corey dev environment also? And in this case, I don't, because I didn't set it up with a bunch of folks, but I could kind of make sure that I had appropriate collaboration people attending also. So I want to use my web app. Should be popping open my Barton Corey dev team. I'm in the UG channel, and here is my 3D printer inquiry. About to render, hopefully. It should look basically identical to what we were just looking at. Instead of waiting for that to fully draw, I'm just going to say, I want to show you quickly the files kind of integration as well. So I'm still in my channel here. Let's just upload a quick file. Sure, why not a JPEG? It's as good as anything else. The main thing is to get a file to show up. So we have a file in our files repository. Hopefully that will go ahead and draw that actual record here in just a minute, but I still have it up. So this is my data record. And one of the things that we have in Dynamics is we can see related documents to this particular record. And if I click into this, I can see documents from a few different areas, but it's going to default because I connected this document to my team. It's going to say, well, show me the team's repository as the kind of primary location that it's showing stuff from. And that's that same JPEG file. So I can collaborate without leaving Dynamics on this side. And if I'm a Teams user, I can be right in the same Teams files repository. Now, as a Dynamics user, I've got other things that I could look at here, like OneDrive or other SharePoint sites that might be connected with Dynamics so that I could store and look for data in many different places if I wanted to. But on this particular record, I've only stored them in the one place, so that's why only one shows here. If I had different data stored in different places that were all tied to this record, I could kind of switch between them or say I want to look at them all. If there's more than one, it'll actually give you an option to say just search across all those locations. So pretty slick document collaboration scenario to go along with the full collaboration scenario from within Dynamics here. And then, of course, from within Teams here, we're now seeing the whole thing. Oh, admin didn't consent to user sync. Ah. So that must have been something I didn't go fully do when I enabled the Dynamics 365 Teams app to consent to that. But anyway, that much is absolutely there. So now we've got all the same tools that you saw earlier, but I started it all from a Dynamics record instead of starting it from Teams and just hitting the plus because I was a Dynamics-centric user.
So that brings up a good point. We've got a question, and of course, I know that this community wants to know when they restrict and control Teams creation, how would that be applicable in Dynamics if you are a Dynamics license user trying to get into Teams? And is there a way that you've seen, Bart, that you can hide the create a new team button in there?
I have not even tried to test either of those scenarios yet. This is new enough stuff that I know that it functions in its full featured setup. I would actually expect that if you turned off the ability for a user to create a team, that would actually turn it off if someone hit this button as well. But I'm not 100% sure because it could be a back-end service account that does this work on behalf of a user instead of doing it as that user. I don't actually know the back-end mechanism that this provisioning happens as.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I would agree with you that it would follow suit using the underlying group restriction that you do in Azure Active Directory. So if you restrict it there or PowerShell or whatever, you're also restricting it in SharePoint, restricting it in Teams. The create new team button won't display, and I assume it would just follow suit in Dynamics. Hope that helps, Jason.
And it doesn't look like that particular question got documented that I see quickly on the Teams integration kind of place that it drops me when I hit learn more here. But that would be a fairly easy thing to test, though, in terms of what that scenario looked like. And of course, if it was disabled when I clicked on create a new team, actually, and this is just creating a new, well, yeah. If that was disabled, I would expect that when I click this, and I would probably be able to go ahead and fill this much out, including setting the sensitivity label, but when I hit next, it would probably fail for saying my user doesn't have appropriate rights. I just haven't ever done this in this particular tenant, and I know that the Teams provisioning for this particular user is enabled, so it wouldn't be a valid test yet. Anyway, I'd have to go disable it for this user to make that test happen. So, anyway, good stuff. I like the questions. I just don't happen to have that answer. The last thing that will be coming to Dynamics and it's supposed to actually happen later this month sometime in the commercial tenants, and GCC usually gets it about 2 weeks after the commercial tenants, is that not only will we have a Teams call flyout that will be here over on the right, but that we'll actually have another Teams button that's kind of right by this, and you'll have a choice to say, do I want to have the Teams call flyout pop out or the Teams chat thing fly out? And if it was Teams chat, it would allow me to actually see the persistent chat that was over here around this record that was happening inside of Teams, and I could, weigh in on it without leaving the Dynamics UI in terms of those chat capabilities. Also, to try to round out that experience that you can sort of do all aspects on either UI, depending on where you typically like to work, in terms of chatting, sharing records, sharing data, sharing files. That we've got most of it there. We just don't have that last Teams chat functionality showing up in this area yet. I think in my presentation, I've got a little preview of what that's going to look like. Just might as well show it since it's here and we've got a few more minutes. Switch my display settings around again. So I don't think this one shows it, but yeah, now we're seeing I am in Dynamics and I am pulling up chats that I have access to from the Dynamics UI. And you can see on that flyout, I've got a few different things I could click onto. So I'll be able to both just regular chat with people and chat around records with that persistent chat right from the Dynamics UI without having to jump into Teams to do it. So that's coming, just not here yet. And this is showing it in a little bit more detail. So happy to share this presentation. I don't think I've got anything in here that's actually non-disclosure. It just hasn't all turned on in my tenant yet. That 2/3 of it's there, the last third's not. So I don't have anything else teed up to present, but hopefully you found this somewhat useful in terms of where we are and what we still have publicly disclosed, and I would expect another round of innovation to get disclosed before too long. Probably at Ignite, we'll see a whole bunch of more stuff of what the product teams have dreamed up for different ways to link these platforms together. It's a good start.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bart. I think for me, even I learned some things. I kind of live in Teams and I don't usually live on the dynamic side. Just to see some of this integration, I could see just the value being able to leverage managing sales and managing opportunities, and then having just a seamless integration to measure, as you're in a call, measure the sentiment of your client or your customer, and to really evaluate what are the insights that you gain from that call. I think it's just really pretty incredible stuff.
Yeah, and it took, I don't know, 15 minutes of just clicking through a few setup things and it was ready to go with the Microsoft Managed Storage. And it didn't look like it would have been very much harder if I already had an Azure storage account that I'd rather store them in for a little longer storage time than 90 days as a max. So.
Right.
I do have a few other links that I'm not going to click into, but if anybody wants a copy of this presentation, I'll make sure Michelle has a copy. And if she distributes it, then you'll have links to some of these other videos, announcements, blog posts that were documentation that I found. You're welcome to it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you being able to take time away from all your Microsoft Technology Center engagements to show us kind of the preview of what's happening in Dynamics. I think with the Teams dialer, being able to call from Dynamics 365 sales, being able to utilize the chat window too when that's coming, I think it's just gonna just add more value all around to the product.
And again, the big goal is we know there's more tasks coming with more online everything, so keeping people in the UI that they're already in to not have to jump into a different app to task switch is the real goal here. That if you're in Dynamics, just use it and do all the things, chat, call, everything else. If you're in Teams, do everything, including pulling up Dynamics records and collaborating on them and files and everything else without having to jump into that other UI to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, grab the links that are on your Learn More page and then just throw them in the chat. But yeah, we would love a copy of your deck for being able to present on our website. And that goes for you too, Heather. If you're still on, we would love to get a copy.
Will do. Send it on its way.
All right. All right. Well, thank you to the speakers. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead, throw the survey link into our chat, and then we can get you guys out of here. But thank you, everyone, very much for attending. I think even though we were a little delayed, I think we got on track. We can get everybody out of here even that much sooner. All right, survey link, it hasn't changed. It's the same as it's been, is mn365.org/survey. I'm going to run through just a few more slides. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And we'll get this posted as well